Good morning and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Harry Sekulich.
I'm Zara Seidler.
Australia is heading to the polls on the 3rd of May. The election is now officially underway to decide who will lead the country. Will Anthony Albanese return to Canberra as the next PM, or will Peter Dutton become the first leader to replace a one-term Prime Minister in nearly 100 years? Today, we'll tell you everything you need to know about the upcoming vote and what the election means for you.
Harry, I'm mostly excited about the fact that we don't have to mention in every podcast that an election is due by a certain date.
Oh my gosh, I'm so happy, Zara.
I have
a
clarification,
date.
I know. It does truly feel like much of the political world has kind of been on hold as we wait for this day to be announced. And now that it has, we are in campaign mode officially.
And May 3 will be Nerd Christmas.
It will be. It's usually budget, but hey, now it is election. Harry, I think a really good place to start this podcast is just by walking people through what the announcement of a date actually means. So last Friday, Anthony Albanese travelled to the Governor-General's house. He then announced that an election would be held on May 3rd. For someone that's listening to this podcast and doesn't really know why that matters to them, what happens from now?
So I'm calling out to you, all first-time voters. This is the info that you need to hear, and I wish I had heard when I voted for the first time when I was 18. So if you are over the age of 18 and you are an Australian citizen, you need to register to vote.
Yeah.
And that means firing up the Australian Electoral Commission website and just plugging in your details. You might just need your driver's license or a passport, some official documentation, and then go through the registration form to enrol.
And I mean, that's such an important point to start with, because so many people think that the minute you turn 18, you're magically added to this list. That means that,
I absolutely did.
Because no one's really ever told otherwise. And so it's really important to know that you have to make a conscious effort to enroll yourself. It doesn't just happen by itself.
And even if you have voted before, if you are on the electoral roll, you might have changed address or you might have changed your details since then in some capacity. And it's best to let the AEC know that that is what's happened, because otherwise you might end up voting for a district that you no longer live in. I don't know if you remember, Zara, but I actually moved at the end of last year.
Yeah.
So I decided to just check my details on the AEC and it was my old address. So you can be absorbed in this day in, day out like you and I are and still not have the right details on the AEC. So this is for everyone.
Yeah, very important. So if you've moved at all, you do need to update that information with the AEC like Harry did on Friday. Now, Harry, obviously there are the mechanics of the election and then there's kind of the substance of the election, of what we are doing, which is choosing what we want the future of this country to look like. Can you just give us a bit of a kind of elevator pitch, I guess, for both of the two leaders of the major parties here in Australia?
All right, well, let's start with the person who's actually called the election, the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese. He's been the leader of the Labor Party since 2019. He's been in Parliament quite a long time. He was first elected in 1996. So he's spent a very big chunk of his adult life in the halls of Parliament.
Our whole lifetimes.
Our entire lifetime. Actually,
he's been
before
in
I
one
was
job.
born. I just realised that now. That
long
is
time.
Wild.
Yeah.
So a bit about his backstory. He grew up in social housing in inner West Sydney with a mother who suffered a quite severe form of arthritis, and he was raised by a single mother on a disability pension. Over the past 3 years as Prime Minister, he's focused on some key issues like wages and industrial relations reforms, which are probably some of his more comfortable areas. Like a lot of Prime Ministers, he's had some reforms for the nation in mind, and the most obvious example of that was the Indigenous Voice to Parliament, which was a referendum that we went to in October 2023. And as you might remember, Zara, it was decisively unsuccessful. Now, if we look on to the other side of the ledge, there's the coalition leader, Peter Dutton. For his backstory, he's a former police officer and he was born and raised in Queensland in what he says was a pretty typical working class family. And now he represents a seat in northern Brisbane. Much like Anthony Albanese, he's been in Parliament a long time as well, since 2001. So also dedicating a great amount of his adult life into Parliament. He ran for the Liberal Party at a state election when he was 19 years old, if you can believe
young.
it.
Yeah.
He wasn't successful at that one, but he was later successful for federal parliament. He rose through the ranks over time and he took over the leadership after Scott Morrison lost the 2022 election.
Yeah, so here we have two leaders who, as you've made clear, have been in Parliament, have been kind of around the traps for a really, really long time and are by no means new faces for many people. But I think something that we do need to really hone in on is that for the majority of our listeners, unless you are in the two seats that Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese represent, you're not actually voting for those two leaders. You're voting for your local MP. Talk me through what that actually means.
It is quite astounding, the number of my friends who think that we do vote for the Prime Minister. Like over in the US, you vote for the President, but it's not the same system here. And the way that I like to explain this is think of the election as 150 mini races happening. Those are your local contests. Known as lower house seats. So that's your local representative that you're going to vote for. So on election day, you will have two pieces of paper. First one is for the House of Reps. That's a local contest. And then you'll also have a piece of paper for the Senate. That's the really big one for whatever state and territory you live in. At each state, there will be 6 senators up for re-election and the territories automatically go to a re-election for their 2 senators each. When we look at how you actually form government, that all depends on the lower house and how the numbers fall there. So the magic number is 76 seats. You need to win at least 76 of those 150 races that I spoke about.
I just want to interrupt here because some listeners, if they've been paying close attention, might be confused why it's 150 and not 151 because we did see one seat abolished.
That's right.
Yeah.
And very, very good maths, Zara.
Honestly, I had to check it myself because I was like, am I remembering wrong?
No, it is changing a little bit at this election, and that's because of what's known as redistribution.
Yeah.
So the AEC, which controls all things based on the election, have abolished 2 seats on the East Coast. So that's in New South Wales and Victoria, and they've created one new seat over in Western Australia, the seat of Bullwinkle, which I'm going to vote as my favourite
Unbelievable name.
Love the name Bullwinkle. With all the population dynamics and the different movements of the seats and distributions, we now have 150 seats in the parliament instead of 151. It's just a small technicality. You still need 76 to win.
Cool.
That's because you want at least half of the lower house plus at least one person who will become the speaker. It's very technical, but basically you get half plus one.
Yeah, and that gives you majority.
That's right.
So what's the road then for both parties to get to there?
Hi, I'm Ola.
And I'm Elliot.
We're the 2-person team behind everything video and audio here at the Daily Aus.
If you want to help us grow so we can deliver more of the content that you love, be sure to hit subscribe.
Now let's get back to the video.
So the government at the moment has 78 seats in the lower house. It basically just needs to hold on to all its ground that it currently holds. And then the coalition has 55 seats in the lower house. It's very likely they're going to win back 2 seats from defections in this term of parliament. And then on top of that, they need to win a further 19 seats to get to a majority. We also have a massive crossbench, Zara. It was historically a record vote for third parties and independents.
So you're talking there about the Greens, you're talking about Teals, you're talking about other independents that don't fall into those kind of groupings. And they sit really in the middle of the two
middle. Yeah, that's why we call them the crossbench.
Yeah,
and
everything's very literal in our parliament.
I think so as well. But I think my mind works well with that literalness.
Me too. Not about abstract. You said that the government basically needs to hold on and not lose seats, whereas the coalition needs to add to the number of seats that they currently have in the House in order to form government. What are the key battleground states? I know that's quite an American way of putting it, but where are both leaders focusing on to try get those seats?
Well, that comes back to the campaign trail that is now well and truly underway. We're going to see both leaders jumping around the country, jetting off to different parts of Australia where they feel like they need to either defend some of their seats or they feel they have a chance of winning some seats off the opposition. Labor performed strongly in Western Australia at the 2022 election. It won a swag of seats off the coalition there. So it's very likely we're going to see Anthony Albanese visiting Western Australia to defend those seats. It's also very likely we're going to see Labor campaigning hard in northern Tasmania, in Queensland, where they haven't been as successful as other states in securing some seats. In terms of some of the battlegrounds, we're going to see Peter Dutton and the coalition really targeting outer Melbourne, outer Sydney, those outer suburban realms, which Peter Dutton has been talking about for quite some time now, that very specific voter, someone who's in a peri-urban area, who might be under mortgage stress, struggling with cost of living. It's shaping up as a key battleground because some of these areas are actually Labor strongholds.
Yeah.
Traditionally constantly voting Labor, but are very much in play. There have been some swings at previous elections against the Labor Party in these parts of Sydney and Melbourne, and Peter Dutton is wanting to capitalise on that as much as possible. So I think, you know, there's going to be tight races right around the country, but I would say we're going to be zeroing in a lot on Melbourne and Sydney and those outer urban areas.
And I mean, you're actually going to be at the forefront of that because you're joining the campaign trail for both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader. That basically means when they wake up and decide that they want to go to Victoria and WA in one day, a whole bunch of journalists go with them and are able to kind of map this journey. Talk me through that a bit.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very exciting that the Daily Aus gets to join the campaign trail for both the government and the opposition.
Yeah.
And it's basically a day-by-day thing, this campaign trail. We don't know what the schedule looks like, but that's because both leaders are wanting to be as flexible as possible of where they feel they need to go, where their scrutineers are telling them there is vulnerability in this area, or there might be an event that comes up in, let's just say, Darwin, and both leaders want to, you know, fly in and deal with whatever is happening up in that part of the world. So it's a very unpredictable, very malleable 4 weeks ahead of us. But it's going to be very exciting. And that's just part of the campaign trail fun. You just never know where.
Wake up and which state will you visit today?
Exactly. So, Zara, I might have to just tell you, I'm heading on a plane to Perth tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite remarkable, especially in a country as big as Australia, that they'd have to cover so much ground in such a short period of time.
It makes me appreciate the role of journalists in the US just a little bit more because they were darting back and forth from Nevada to North Carolina. That is just something else. It's mind-boggling.
It truly is. Now, I do just want to end with what I'm sure a lot of our listeners are wanting to ask, which is who's going to win this election? What are the polls telling us right now about who's in front?
Well, my great prediction is I don't know.
Yeah.
So it's really anyone's game at this stage. The polls are telling us it's going to be tight.
Yeah.
At the start of this year, it was looking like the coalition and Peter Dutton were in the hot seat to win. They were performing quite strongly on a two-party preferred basis against the Labor Party. The government's polling was showing that its primary votes, so the number of people voting one Labor, looked like it was declining. It was on that slope going downwards. It looks like things have evened out a little bit, and as with a lot of campaigns we've seen in Australian history, it does tighten up as we get closer to polling day. And many commentators are also predicting we're going to enter a minority government. So neither Labor or the coalition are going to get enough seats, so that's the 76 seats it needs, to form a majority government. So they will need to negotiate with the crossbench, with the Greens, with other minor parties. So May the 3rd is the date that Australia will decide. And no matter what the polling tells us, what's going to matter is what people actually choose on the day. Or in the lead up to the day, because you can vote early.
You can, and pre-polling is growing in popularity.
Very much so. And mail-in voting, all forms of voting. One thing that I can say is that this election is going to be historic for a number of reasons. If Anthony Albanese is re-elected as the Prime Minister, he will be the first Prime Minister to win a back-to-back election since John Howard. We've spoken about our age here a little bit, Zara. We were quite young when John Howard was still Prime Minister. So we think about how many times we've changed leaders since then. Albanese will be the first one to win a back-to-back election. If Peter Dutton wins, it'll be the first time a one-term government has been booted since 1931. Just think about that. That's nearly 100 years that a government has not won 2 consecutive terms. So that's quite a mountain to climb for any opposition leader. But as I said, the polls are looking quite tight. there's every chance that Peter Dutton and the coalition could win this election. And there's every chance that Anthony Albanese and Labor could win as well. And there's every chance that we could be waiting for days and days and days to see what the major parties and the leaders negotiate with a crossbench and form a minority government. It's all part of Democracy Manifest, Zara.
Yeah, sure is.
And this is a little bit of a flag to anyone listening today or watching us on YouTube. TDA is going to be here every step of the way.
Absolutely.
We're going along on the campaign trail and we want to hear your questions. We want to hear what you want to know from the leaders. And you know what? I just can't wait to get started, Zara.
Me
This
too.
is so exciting.
It really is. Harry, thank you for taking us through that today. And thank you for listening to this very exciting election podcast today. If you do want to help TDA grow during a time that's as important as a federal election, the best way you can do that is by hitting subscribe or follow on whatever platform you are listening to us on. Your support means so much to us, so thank you so much, and we'll be back later today. Bye.